We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Vavam and Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 96b. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that the reason why the tanur in the Beis HaMikdash, the oven in the Beis HaMikdash, is not made out of earthenware is because it has the status of a klishares, and a klishares is not supposed to be made out of earthenware. And the Gemara now continues and says, Ve'afilu Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda lo ka'amar ela de'etz. Even Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, he only said it's okay to make a klishares out of eitz. Eitz is considered to be more substantial, more important, avol decheres lo, but to make it out of earthenware, no, that would be problematic. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is found in Meseches Sukkah. And Rashi explains, avol decheres lo, klishares cannot be made out of earthenware. Kedamrinan hasam, like we say over there in Meseches Sukkah, my miet, what is excluded? Miet cheres. Again, earthenware is excluded. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda have a rogal kamei Rami Bar Chama. Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda was accustomed to learning before Rami Bar Chama. Shavkei v'ozal Rav Sheshes, he left him, and he went to Rav Sheshes. Yom achad pagabe, one day he met him, Rami Bar Chama met Rav Yitzchak, and Amar lei, so he said to him, Al kafta nokton reicha asi lo liyad, when the tax collector, when he grabs you, so to speak, does that smell, does that fragrance, does it come to the person's hand? Meaning, mishum da'azlis loch lekami de Rav Sheshes, because you went to Rav Sheshes, havis loch ki Rav Sheshes, do you think that you're now like Rav Sheshes? And Rashi explains, Amar le Rami le Rav Yitzchak, Rami said to Rav Yitzchak, Al kaftin nokton reach asi lo liyad, mishum do azlis loch kamed Rav Sheshes, havis loch ki Rav Sheshes. Moshel, who this is like a moshel al gasei haruach, on people that are arrogant, mishtadlin lamod b'mokum gedolim, they want to stand by other people that are great. V'yamar haduchis achazani biyadi, and so he said, when the tax collector grabs my hand, v'reach hamalucha niklat l'soch yadi, does that mean that the scent of kingship, that now is captured by my hand? Is that what it means? And the Gemara continues, Amar le, he said back to him, Lav mishum hachi, it's not because of that, it wasn't because of gaiva, it wasn't because of arrogance that I went before Rav Sheshes, Mar, but the reason was as follows, Mar ki bo'ina milsa, the master, meaning to say, you, Rami Bar Chama, when I ask something, Pashat li misvara, you give me an answer from logic. And therefore, ki mashkachna masnisa, parchalo, if we find a brisa that contradicts what you said, now we have a question on it. But Rav Sheshes ki bo'ina milsa minei, but when it comes to Rav Sheshes, when I ask something from him, Pashat limi masnisa, he gives me an answer from a brisa. Techinami mashkachas masnisa, uparcha masnisu masnisa, even if I find a brisa, and it's a question, but it's still just one brisa against another brisa. So Amar le, so then he said to him, Boi mini milsa, de ifshadloch ki masnisa, he said, fine, ask me a question, and I'll give you an answer from a brisa. And so Boi minei, he asked him the following question. Bishel b'mixas kli, let's say the chatos is cooked in just some of the vessel, and it's talking here about a vessel that's metal, so ton marika ushtifa, so then does the entire vessel, does it require scouring and rinsing? Oain ton, or maybe not, maybe the whole vessel doesn't require it, it's just that particular area where it was cooked. Amar le said to him, Eino ton, he said it does not require, meaning the whole vessel doesn't require, it's just the area where it was actually cooked. Midi dahavia hazah, just like we find when the blood sprays on a garment, you only have to do that part of the garment, you only have to wash that part of the garment, and so therefore the same thing is true when it comes to bishul b'mixas kli. But the Gemara continues that Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda asked him, V'halo tanahachi, but there's no brisa that says that. You said you were going to give me an answer from a brisa. This is not from a brisa. Amar le, he said back to him, Mistabra kebeged, it's logical that it should be the same as a garment. Ma beged eino ton kibus ela makom hadam, just like by a beged, the requirement of washing is only the area of the blood. Af kli, so too by a vessel, eino ton mariko shtifa, the requirement of scouring and rinsing is ela b'makom bishul, it's only in the place where the cooking was done. Amar le, he said back to him, Midami, can you really compare the two? Dam lo mefafeya, when it comes to the blood on the garment, it doesn't spread. But bishul mefafeya, but when there's cooking, that spreads throughout the vessel. V'yod, and further, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, chomer b'hazah mi marika ushtifa, there's a stringency by hazah more than marika and shtifa. The chomer b'marika ushtifa mi b'hazah, and there's also a stringency by marika and shtifa more than hazah, as follows. Chomer b'hazah, a stringency when it comes to hazah, the halacha again of the blood getting on the garments. Shahazah yeshna bechatos hachitzonos uvechatos hapnimios. Hazah applies by the outer chatos and the inner chatos. V'yeshna lifnei zrika, it also applies before the blood is thrown. Masha ein kein b'marika ushtifa, and that's not true by marika and shtifa. And chomer b'marika ushtifa, there's also a stringency by marika and shtifa. Shaha marika ushtifa noheges bein b'kodshei kodshim, bein b'kodshim kalim. The halachas of marika and shtifa apply whether it's kodshei kodshim or kodshim kalim that are cooked in the vessel. And further, bishul b'mixas hakli ton mariko shtifa kol hakli. If part of the vessel was used for cooking, the marika and shtifa is required for the entire vessel. Masha ein kain b'hazah, and those stringencies are not true by hazah. They're not true by blood getting on the garment. And so you see clearly from this brisa that the entire vessel requires marika and shtifa, even if only part of the vessel the cooking was done in. Amar le, he said back to me, Tanya. He said, well, if the brisa says that, the brisa says that, I stand corrected. And the Gemara continues, V'tayim amai, ultimately, what is the reason for this? Why is it that the whole vessel needs marika and shtifa? And the Gemara says, Amar Krotz, because the pasuk says, Vim bechli nechoshes bushala. It says, Vim bechli nechoshes bushala, which we understand to mean, V'afilu b'mixas kli. It means even if it's just part of the kli, that's what it means when it says, Vim bechli nechoshes bushala. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Echad kodshe kodshim v'chulu. Again, the halacha marika and shtifa applies both by kodshe kodshim and by kodshim kalim. And the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught chatos. The pasuk says chatos, so it actually specifically identifies korban chatos. Ainli ela chatos. I only know it's by korban chatos. Kol kodshim minayin. How do we know it applies by all kodshim? If any kodshim are cooked in the vessel, in the metal vessel, bechli nechoshes, that we say that it requires scouring and rinsing. Talmud lomar kodesh kadashim hi. The pasuk says kodesh kadashim hi. That includes again all kodshim. Yachol shani marbes truma. Now one might think I'll even include truma in this halacha. Let's say truma is cooked in the vessel. Talmud lomar osa. The pasuk says the word osa prat l'truma. That excludes truma. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. And the brisa continues. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says kodshe kodshim tu'unin mariko shtifa. Kodshe kodshim require marika and shtifa. However, kodshim kalim einon tu'unin mariko shtifa. Kodshim kalim, they do not require mariko shtifa. Tichsiv kodesh kadashim. It says kodesh kadashim in the pasuk. We understand that to mean kodshe kodshim in, kodshim kalim lo. It only applies to kodshe kodshim, the holiest level of karbonos, but not to kodshim kalim, those of lesser kedusha. And the Gemara continues, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? Again, Rabbi Yehuda says, osa prat l'truma, but otherwise all kodshim are included. And the Gemara says, mid itzrich osa l'mu'ute truma, from the fact that the word osa excludes truma, mechlal de kodshim kalim tu'unin mariko shtifa. That implies that kodshim kalim, just like kodshim, require mariko shtifa. Rabbi Shimon amar lach, and Rabbi Shimon will say to you, osa kide amrinon, or kide amron. The word osa is like a drasha that we had earlier. Rashi explains, osa kide amron, osa ksheira v'lo psula. It means it's a kosher, but it doesn't apply to disqualified. The after Rabbi Shimon le'el. Rabbi Shimon said this earlier. He said that chatas sha'isa shasa kosher v'nifsala. Again, Rabbi Shimon said if it was disqualified, the halacha doesn't apply. That was a drasha that we had earlier. And the Gemara continues, truma lo boy shtifa marika. We're excluding truma over here. Does truma not require shtifa and marika? Vatanya, but we learned in a brisa, kedera shabishal babaser. If you have a pot that meat was cooked in the pot, lo yavashal b'chalav. You can't cook in their milk. V'im bishal, and if you do cook then, so b'no tam. There's halach of no tam. If it imparts flavor, then it's problematic. And truma, let's say you have a kedera that you cook truma in, lo yavashal b'chulin, then you can't cook chulin in there. V'im bishal, and if you do cook chulin in the pot, b'no tam. So again, if the truma imparts taste, then it's going to be a problem. Only kohanim will be allowed to eat that chulin. And so you see there has to be some idea of kashering when it comes to truma. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Abaya says, Lo tzricha ela l'do amar mar. It's necessary for that which the master said, Bishal b'mixas kli ton mariko shtifa kol hakli. There's a halacha over here by marika and shtifa, like we said above, that if even part of the vessel was used for cooking, the entire vessel needs marika shtifa. That's not true in a general situation of kashering, hatruma, but if it would be truma and you're kashering the vessel from truma, so you don't have that gzeres hakasav of kol hakli, so lo tzarech ela makam bishal. So then the kashering is only needed by the area of the vessel where the cooking was done. Rava says a different answer. Lo tzricha ela l'do amar mar. It's necessary for what the master said, that the halacha mariko shtifa is specifically b'mayim. It's specifically with water. V'lo b'yayin, you can't use wine in the kashering process. And b'mayim, you have to use water. V'lo b'mazug, you can't use diluted wine. But in this case, by truma, afilu b'yayin v'afilu b'mazug, you can use wine, you can use diluted wine. That would be fine in the regular kashering process. And the Gemara continues with a third answer. Rabba bar bar Ula Amar Rabba bar Ula says, Lo tzricha ela l'do Amar Mar, it's necessary for what the master said, Marika ushtifa bitzonein. There's a halach of Marika and shtifa bitzonein, meaning not only do you do it with hot water, but then you do it with cold water as well. Ha afilo bechamin, but over here by regular kashering, it's just hot water. The Gemara says, Hanich l'man damar Marika ushtifa bitzonein. Now that works according to the one who says that you have to do the Marika and shtifa with cold water as well. Ela l'man damar Marika bechamin ushtifa bitzonein. The one who says that the Marika is with hot water, but the shtifa is with cold water. So then, Michael Amemar, what are you going to say? Because the Marika is bechamin anyhow. And the Gemara answers simply shtifa yeserta, but there still is that extra shtifa, that rinsing with cold water. Again, that's necessary over here in our cases of kodshim, but it would not be necessary when it comes to truma. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Tarfon says, Bishel mitchilas haregel. Let's say in the vessel, the person cooked from the beginning of the holiday, and so there was kachim cooked in this vessel, and now marika and shtifa is necessary. Do you have to do that the entire regel every single time something is cooked? You don't have to do that. Yevashel bo kol haregel. You can continue to cook the entire holiday, and then you don't have to do the marika and shtifa throughout the holiday every single time you use the vessel to cook the kachim in. The Chachamim Omer, the Chachamim say, ad zman achila. This is only true ad zman achila, and this will be explained in the Gemara. And the Mishnah continues, Marika shtifa, when it comes to Marika and shtifa, Marika ke Marika sakos. Marika is like the Marika sakos, ushtifa ke shtifa sakos. And shtifa refers to shtifa sakos, that's talking about a cup. Rashi here explains, Marika ke Marika sakos means mi bifnim ke kos shel bracha. Marika is the way that you cleanse a cup or rinse a cup on the inside when talking about a kos shel bracha. Kedamrin bebrachas, like we say in bracha, shaton hadocha bifnim, or mi bifnim, ushtifa mi bachutz. It needs hadach on the inside, shtif on the outside. There's a different kind of rinsing you do on the inside of a cup than you do on the outside of a cup, and that's what the Mishnah is referring to. Marika refers to what would be done on the inside, that kind of rinsing. Shtifa would refer to what is done on the outside. And the Mishnah continues, Marika ushtifa bitzonen. Marika and shtifa is done with cold water, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Zayin Amid Aleph.